Hey, good afternoon to you. 506 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up this hour, Congressman Matt Rosendale joins us at 5:30. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. A couple quick things for you here. One, we've got some breaking news right now coming from the White House. There's the National Christmas Tree is supposed to be lit on Thursday. I'm not sure they're going to make it. Listen to the audio that's just coming in. Here it is from WUSA.
I'll get you back to that breaking news that we've been following near the White House. The National Park Service, they told us just within the last 15 minutes that a big gust of wind knocked over the National Christmas Tree. It's all set for a big tree lighting ceremony on Thursday. Ardelia Gonsalves
just arrived. Covering it right now. So the National Christmas Tree has been knocked over by, they say, a big gust of wind has knocked it over. If that's not symbolism, I don't know what is. I really don't. So the Christmas tree is collapsed. Biden's birthday cake is ablaze. It's like, what is going on in our country right now? Here's your sign. Here's your sign. Meanwhile, we've got a report this week, a troubling report this week on the excesses of the federal government yet again. Here's a woman with the Air Marshals Council, and she was on Fox this week relaying the extent to which the Air Marshals are tracking anyone who was in the Capitol on January 6th of 2021. Take a listen to some of this audio, and then we'll get to our guest on this subject. Here is a bit of that from Fox.
How many Air Marshals are on planes right now, and how many do you think there should be to get to a safe level?
Well, Carly, we're not flying right now. The only missions that we're doing are Quiet Skies missions, and those are missions that are following the January 2021 people. So we're either on the border for illegal immigrants, or we're following folks from January 2021. We're not doing our regular missions where we're out there looking for the bad guys. So right now on most flights, you're not going to have Air Marshals.
That's Sonia Labasco, the director of the Air Marshal National Council.
What do you mean by that you're following January 2021 people? What does that mean?
That means our primary mission is a little group called Quiet Skies. It's a mission called Quiet Skies that we're following people that flew into the National Capital Region in January 2021. You did not have to go to the Capitol or the rally, and you've been put on a specific list that TSA now has assigned Air Marshals to follow these people who have not had any type of criminal investigation. They haven't committed a crime, but yet 3 years later, we're following the same individuals.
Okay, this is some of the craziest stuff we've heard of late. For more on this topic, a man who's not surprised by it, Kyle Seraphin, a former FBI agent, host of the Kyle Seraphin Podcast, joins us now. Kyle, good to have you back with us, sir. Thank you.
Hey, Vince. Thanks for having me back on.
Tell me, if you can, what you know about this Quiet Skies program. What is the federal government doing to our own citizens?
So the Quiet Skies program was exposed by the Boston Globe, of all people, in about 2018. I think it was in the middle of the year. And they wrote a series of exposés based on a TSA whistleblower, a federal air marshal whistleblower, that came forward and said that certain Americans, and at that point they didn't realize it was all Americans, but it was mostly international travelers, had the potential of being followed by a surveillance team of air marshals. And that's not necessarily troubling for what it would do. They were supposed to follow people that were on high-risk flights. They would fly out of Qatar, they'd fly out of the Middle East, they'd fly out of East Asia, and they'd fly back into the United States, and they would accompany these potential risks, and they would make sure, based on analysis and whatever else was going on inside the intel divisions, that they were mitigating threats before they became threats, and if something happened, they were there. That's what you want the federal air marshals to do. The problem is that in January of 2021, the Quiet Skies program morphed into a surveillance program of people that flew into the National Capital Region in and around January 6th of 2021. They didn't have to attend the rally. They didn't have to have pending charges. They didn't have to be accused of anything other than they were accused of flying to the Washington, D.C. area, whether that be BWI, whether that be the Manassas Regional, whether it be at Reagan or Dulles. If you flew in there somewhere between like the 4th or the 5th and the 7th or the 8th, they had this whole manifest list of everybody that flew in. You could have flown in for a job interview, for a funeral, for a academic competition. It doesn't matter what you flew in for. They can put you on this list, and anybody who's seen that, they would notice on their boarding pass that they have 4 S's marked on the boarding pass, and they're subjected to extremely thorough, enhanced, sort of theatrical type screening, where they're patted down, they're scanned everywhere, every zipper has gone through the bomb detector, the sniffers and stuff, and none of this stuff has to do with any criminal charges that are levied against you. It's just that you happen to be flying into an area when you did, and that happened to be the time when that riot took place on January 6th.
When you joined the FBI, if you would, my guess is that one of the things they instructed you on is that overly broad surveillance efforts that infringe upon the rights of American citizens are not allowed, correct?
Yeah, so you do have some limits. Now, physically surveilling people is pretty broad. It doesn't actually necessarily infringe on your constitutional liberties to be able to watch somebody, especially if they're doing something in public. But my real concern in this particular program, especially going after people that are not accused of doing anything, is twofold. Number one, we just got a letter, and it came from the Air Marshals National Council, which is a private advocacy group that works with the federal air marshals. Sonia Labasco is a retired federal air marshal. And what they found out is that Benny Johnson, who was both the chairman of Homeland Security and also the famous Unselect Committee on the January 6th investigation, recommended that they do something to this effect.
Benny Thompson is who you're referring to, correct?
Benny Thompson, sorry. Benny
rather
Johnson
than Benny Johnson, our friend, the different guy.
That's right. Well said. The strange thing is that it seems to uncover the free movement that you have a constitutional right to do in this country. And it's doing so, and it's removing that right to move around freely without any due process. And to me, that seems like a real problem. That's what you're advised you can't do. You can't restrict movement of people, certainly not as a federal government, under the Fifth Amendment. You have to have due process.
I'm sorry, but I got to one of the things that stands out about what you said, and maybe this hasn't been a problem, but I think it should be, the idea that even if the federal government isn't impeding my movement, if I have agents following me around from a distance, I consider that a gross violation of my rights as an American. I'm not paying taxes for you to follow me or freaking around. You just, stay away from me. I'm not even accused or it's not even suggested I did anything wrong. That seems to me a gross violation of my rights.
It would definitely be surprising to you to learn that you are living in one of the most surveilled areas in America. The National Capital Region, Northern Virginia, and Maryland, and Washington, D.C. have upwards of 20 surveillance teams running around just on the FBI end of things that are oftentimes following people that are not accused of any crimes whatsoever. That's not the accusation. They're there for information purposes. Some of them might be counterterrorism subjects that might get involved in something like that, but a lot of them are national security potential threats where they think that they're interacting with foreign powers on the intelligence side of the apparatus. That's the counterintelligence side. So there's a lot of people that are being followed around. Some of them are American citizens. Many of them are foreign nationals. It's a mixed bag, but your expectation of privacy, people probably should realize, not just online, but like in your physical life, you can be followed anywhere you drive. And I know that because I did it for thousands of hours, generally speaking on criminal targets, occasionally not. And when that was not the case, it was always very strange for us because it's like, why do you need people with badges and guns following around someone that's not accused of doing anything wrong? And I think more and more people are going to probably realize that that's a real problem in this country. It's starting to come out that they're not doing that responsibly. It's not making anybody safer, and this Air Marshal program is part of that.
Well, it's insane to me. The Air Marshals, they shouldn't even be following people who were in the Capitol building on January 6th. Let's just start with the basics here. That's nuts. But then to include people who merely flew in, perhaps for tourist visits, just in the vicinity of January 6, 2021. This is a government that's completely out of control. And Kyle, you've been on this case for a while as a whistleblower, but it's always jarring to even find out this new information, even in light of what we already know.
Agreed. The letter that was written, and it dates back only 5 days after January 6th by Rep. Thompson, says one of the bullet points, he's asking for a briefing from the administrator of the TSA, the top guy at TSA. And what he said specifically that jarred me very much was, I want to know what the status is of current efforts to disrupt the travel of white supremacists and other domestic terrorist groups who may be planning attacks further on the United States government and targeting the inauguration of President-elect Joe Biden. For those of us that lived through that inauguration in 2021 and saw the anti-scale fencing that went up that wasn't there on January 6th, but certainly was there by the time they did the inauguration and shut down all of D.C. like a police state, the question was, how did that come up and why did they decide to do it? And, what was the motivation and who was asking for it? And it sounds like this was part of that concerted effort. 5 days later, they'd already branded them white supremacists and domestic terrorists with no charges being filed for the most part, certainly not broadly. Very strange stuff to see. So this is we keep unraveling this onion and we're getting deeper and deeper into the ugly layers of how quickly there was a narrative constructed. Most of the talking points in here could have been written by left-wing media it could have been by ProPublica, or it
Yes.
could have been out of Salon or something like that.
Can I ask you, to what extent is the FBI concerned about left-wing threats? Because, I remember in the lead up to the January 6th specifically, that I wasn't alone. There were a lot of people who were concerned, and I think Trump was among them. This goes back to his request for the National Guard and Nancy Pelosi refusing it and all of this. That the left was going to actually attack the Congressional building, or that the left was going to be riotous, because they always are. They have been. I mean, the history has been that we see all sorts of left-wing violence in the country. Is that taken seriously in the FBI in your experience?
It's really hard to say. I think that it gets some lip service. I think that's the best way to say it. I was on the ground in Portland doing surveillance on the Antifa threat there at the end of the 100 days. And, we didn't do mass arrests. We didn't run down every single person that threw an explosive device at federal officers that were keeping the courthouse safe there, or that were disrupting the city. So that was really strange. I was also on the ground, the day after, members of Antifa or BLM or whatever it was, burned St. John's Church. And I was, shoulder to shoulder with people that were in the Secret Service, that were injured, that had bricks thrown at their heads, and a bunch of other kind of wild riotous stuff that put the president in a bunker, which was a serious thing. And
right.
So all those things got lip service. We didn't see a nationwide manhunt and a concerted effort by the FBI to geofence every single person that was involved in that and go and interview them face to face and haul off a bunch of them and throw them into the gulag in D.C. So that, to me, the actions speak louder than words. They may have said a couple of things, but they certainly didn't go out there and say, this is our 9/11 of this generation. And everybody that was in the FBI management decided to hang their promotion potential on it,
right,
the way that we saw with January 6th.
So
that's tough to see.
So to go back to the original topic here, which is, this Quiet Skies program, and you've got federal air marshals chasing people around who literally were just in the capital region. That's a pretty broad term. In the beginning of January 2021. Is it your impression that the Quiet Skies program is not tracking people who blinded police officers at a federal courthouse in Portland?
Yeah, from everything we have, that is not the case. They're oversaturated with the number of people from January 6th. So by doing that, and like I said, when I say January 6th, I mean people that just flew into the region on that date or around it, which is pretty wild to think about. That's all they're doing right now. This is one of the reasons why the air marshals are so upset. They're a very specialized unit. I trained with the air marshals out of Dulles, where they have their field office. Their job is to take back an aircraft from a threat that may be armed. That's a really specific skill set to use. You're in a linear environment. You have to be a specific type of shooter. You have to have very specialized tactics that are not going to apply anywhere except maybe like a bus or a train.
Yeah.
And so when they have those people handing out sandwiches down at the border, or following around moms or disabled people or infants, as was just exposed on Uncovered DC the other day, they're following around a family that has an infant. And if you can ever fly with an infant, you know exactly how capable you are of doing anything other than maintaining eyes on your infant and keeping them quiet as you fly. So it's just absurd, and it's really sad. It's an abuse. It's making the process the punishment.
Okay, and
I think that's really the whole point.
And this gets to a really important point. So we talked about the costs here that involve Americans' rights, and this idea that the federal government is tracking them for no reason whatsoever. But on the other side of this are what crimes are being missed here. So if they're chasing a World War II veteran who came to D.C. on an honor flight in the beginning of January 2021, what aren't they chasing right now?
Well, the marshals are the air marshal, which is like a subset of TSA. The federal air marshals they're not sitting on flights and being able to intervene unless they just happen to be following a J6 subject. They can potentially intervene on violence in a flight, but they're not flying what we would consider high-risk flights. That's their big problem. That's why a lot of these people signed up, by the way. There's a lot of patriots in that organization that wanted to join up specifically to do a difficult mission after 9/11. They saw our country get attacked, and they wanted to make sure that it never happened again. And there are certain flights that have been analyzed to be more dangerous than others. That's what they used to do. They're not doing that. And in the same way, the FBI is running after misdemeanor threats. They're not going to be doing big fraud cases. Maybe a seven-figure fraud case gets turned down because they don't have fraud investigators because they're running out and doing interviews for misdemeanor trespassing charging or parading or whatever. So there is an opportunity cost. And what it is we're only going to find it out after it happened. We're going to go, well, they were otherwise distracted in that field office, whether it be federal air marshals or FBI or DHS or anybody else that should be doing something else. They're focused on this sort of career builder. That is it's a political narrative.
Yep. Whether it's our border or it's our military or it's the air marshals, there's a theme that runs through all of this, and it's distressing. Right. Kyle Seraphin, thank you very much, as always, for your insights and your patriotism. Very much appreciate that, sir. Thank you. I don't think he's doing that anymore. I think the hunger strike ended a while ago. Let's see here. Man, we do have some craziness out of Coringe's mouth this week, don't we always? Don't we always? But this week, one of the highlights of the White House press briefing was that she was not the craziest person in the room. She was not the craziest. April Ryan is hilarious. She was bragging that she had a conversation with Stevie Wonder earlier this week, and she wanted everybody to know about it, so she brought it up at the White House press briefing.
I had an in-depth conversation with Stevie Wonder last night, who is...
I love Stevie Wonder.
Again, for the serious question.
Everybody's laughing because they realize how ridiculous this is.
I had an in-depth conversation with Stevie Wonder last...
She should turn she turned what should have been an Instagram post into a White House press question. Like, oh, I just talked to Stevie Wonder. How cool is that? Thumbs up.
Who is requesting a meeting with the president. He's very concerned about the black agenda falling along the wayside and issues like laws of 50 years ago that are now being abolished or gutted, to include issues like the Voting Rights Act, what happened in Arkansas last week, affirmative action, Supreme Court, as we've seen it, ban on books, and he's also...
Stevie Wonder's mad that we're ending racial prejudice? What are you talking about exactly?
Even brought up issues of the Congo and the lack of information from the White House. Is the White House amenable to sitting down with Stevie Wonder, who has met with presidents throughout history, to include Ronald Reagan?
Are you going to sit down with Stevie Wonder or not? Stevie Wonder, she goes on to say, well, he helped get MLK Day established and even worked with Ronald Reagan. Yeah, Reagan established MLK Day 37 years ago. I don't think April Ryan is going to bring that up at all. She's not going to mention that detail. She says, are you going to take Stevie Wonder seriously? Does Stevie Wonder think she's a real reporter? Like, who told him that? You'd have to be blind to think April Ryan was a real wait a second. Everybody loves Stevie Wonder, though. I would take the meeting. Watch, they're going to take the meeting, just so you know. The White House is going to take this meeting because they like nothing more than hanging out with celebrities and not doing anything for you. Coming up, we'll be talking to Congressman Matt Rosendale just minutes away. Oh, well, hello there. It is 5:35 now. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us today. 888-630-9625. 888-630-WMAL. Thanks for giving me a couple of days off for Thanksgiving. During my downtime, I, of course, spent it like I always do, watching AOC videos. She did a tele-town hall. Did they have to describe to her what that means beforehand? Does she know even to this day? And here's what she had to say. She was worried that U.S. aid may be used to commit acts of terrorism. I too am worried about that, but not for the same reason.
One of the things that I've been raising continually is concern. And in fact, one of the things that I've been raising continually is the nature of...
That wasn't us, right? That was her saying that twice? Okay. I'm just making sure that we just didn't... Weird.
Continually is concern. And in fact, one of the things that I've been raising continually is the nature of U.S. aid to Israel and how unique it has been, and the way that it, in my view, has potentially added to the unreal human cost of what we're seeing in Gaza. The United States does not condition its aid to Israel. Thousands of you all, thousands of constituents, confirmed constituents, have been calling into my office, calling for a ceasefire, calling for the conditions.
You know what that means, that she had to say the words confirmed constituents? It means that she gets endless calls from people like you, who think that she's a moron.
Of aid. So it's not just my view, but this is also the view of our community, is that what we are witnessing is the gross violation of human rights in Gaza. And that is being done with U.S. military assistance.
Meanwhile, the United States aid is actually being stolen by Hamas in order to commit acts of terrorism. So, as always, she has it exactly wrong. Joining us now is not Congresswoman AOC. It is Congressman Matt Rosendale from Montana's 2nd Congressional District. Congressman, good to have you with us.
Vince, happy Thanksgiving, my friend. It's good to be back on.
Thank you very much, sir. So, am I wrong here? I think AOC has it exactly backwards. U.S. aid is used for acts of terrorism and human rights violations, But it's not because we're sending it to Israel. It's because we're sending it to Hamas.
Yeah. Go figure, right? Golly day. He's got it wrong. I'm stunned. It would be laughable if it wasn't such a tragedy. Look, I watched as we've gotten. I think we're up to 50 hostages. Okay, that have been returned.
Yeah.
What kind of a person? Okay, and these I understand are civilians, Palestinian civilians that are helping Hamas hold children and mothers and grandmothers as hostages during this terrible conflict. I can't even fathom this. And then we know that Hamas is taking some of these supplies that are being sent over there to support Israel. They're taking them. They're stealing them. They're supporting these terrorists, these Hamas terrorists that have snuck in the dark of the night and killed men, women, and children, civilians, taking them out of their homes, taking them out of their beds, and removed their heads. It's the most heinous thing that anybody can imagine. And again, the atrocities, they do continue, but they are being conducted by the Hamas terrorists, and unfortunately are being facilitated by Palestinian civilians that are helping them do so.
So Joe Biden, a couple weeks back, he requested approximately $9.5 billion under a broad blanket of humanitarian aid. This was a part of this massive spending that he wants to do to send mostly money to Ukraine, a little bit to Israel, but $9.5 billion for humanitarian aid. And they claim that it would be for a little bit for Israel, a little bit for Ukraine, a little bit for Gaza. Why? Does anyone in Congress talk about this? Like, what does that mean? If you send billions of dollars to Gaza, aren't we just funding more terror? Does anybody take that seriously?
I do, Vince. I do. And I've been screaming about pumping billions of dollars out of the federal government, which is coming directly out of the taxpayers' pockets, which is adding directly to the $2 to $3 trillion a year national deficit that's going on to the national debt, and we cannot continue to do so. And Biden is so hell-bent on trying to get more money into Ukraine, he will use anything, anyone, or any country as a shill, if you will, to be able to somehow get more money into Ukraine. Why is he so fixated on pumping money into Ukraine? The only thing I can say is 4 years ago, the only thing we knew about Ukraine was that they were laundering dirty money for dirty politicians, beginning with Hunter Biden. And there's about $100 billion worth of American taxpayers' dollars. Most of it, obviously, is borrowed nowadays, that has been sent to Ukraine. And the only thing that they can give a reasonable accounting of is the aid that's been sent in the form of weapons. So that's about $30 billion. And the rest of this, we do not have a good accounting. We don't know where the money's going to. And quite frankly, now we've got Vladimir Zelensky getting himself even more spun up because he hadn't had a fix in a while. He hadn't had a payment in a while.
Yeah.
And so he's screaming louder if somebody else is getting more attention than he is. And he's come out and said it takes $80 billion a year to run his country, and he expects the United States of America to be footing that bill for payment, for pensions, for everything. And I, for one, am not going to sign off on that.
Okay, let me play some audio for you. This is Speaker Mike Johnson yesterday. This is so weird. I was at Sarasota Airport because I was traveling. He apparently was there at the very same time answering a question about Ukraine as a spending priority. He's a Republican, of course, Speaker of the House. Here's what he had to say.
Ukraine is another priority. Of course, we can't allow Vladimir Putin to march through Europe, and we understand the necessity of assisting there. What we've said is that if there is to be additional assistance to Ukraine, which most members of Congress believe is important, we have to also work in changing our own border policy. And so there's been a lot of thoughtful negotiation ongoing with that. I think most of our Senate colleagues recognize that those two things need to move together because we owe that to the American people. That's what.
So should spending in Ukraine be a priority on par with our border?
No, it should not. I've introduced legislation in the 117th Congress early on in this conflict, and I've reintroduced it now, Vince, here in the 118th Congress, that says that we won't send a penny to Ukraine until we have control over our own southern border. Not until we spend X amount of dollars on our southern border, until we have control over our southern border. And I'm getting ready to introduce some more legislation that basically puts a large damper on any kind of immigration, because we have had millions and millions. We're approaching 10 million people that have come into our country illegally, and this has to stop until folks can be deported that came here illegally and assimilated that came here legally.
Yeah.
And we have to get – look, this has been done in the past.
Smart.
This is not unique, to our time now. When we have these large influxes, we've got to address it. But I can tell you, I cannot support sending more funding to Ukraine while our southern border is wide open. Never could. Supported, I'll tell you what I did support, sanctions against Russia for conducting an unprovoked attack on Ukraine. Okay, I'll support that, but I'm not going to put our people at risk, our dollars at risk, by continuing to send money that is unaccounted for to a country that doesn't really. Look, most recently we saw that Vladimir Zelensky, he now has canceled the elections, okay? Not heading in a good direction.
No, not at all. So let me go, can I flesh out the policy proposal you just put out for a moment ago? You said you're going to introduce legislation. Did I hear you correctly that would impose a moratorium on legal immigration until we get control of illegal immigration?
Based upon the illegal immigration, we're not going to ask for the basically the quotas from different countries, other countries that has already been established, and also for our work visas, not to stop that, because there's a certain amount of people that have already been coming in legally, working, returning back to their country of origin. We don't want to stop that, because I don't want to take my agricultural producers and put them in a pinch. But any expansion or new entries that we do need to put a moratorium on.
I do think so. This is kind of an interesting idea, because if you were to stop handing out, visas to tech employees, and all of a sudden, you know what I mean? And like all of a sudden these big corporations lost these flow of workers that normally come in under these legal means. How much pressure could you get these companies to impose on Washington to crack down on illegal immigration?
So I will tell you right now, that's a whole separate argument, but I really have a problem with the tech industry that has been exploiting. There's no other way to put it. Exploiting people from other countries, bringing them in, paying them low wages. They're basically indentured service. They have to stay at that company.
Yes, they do.
They're not allowed to move on. They are supposed to only do that when they do not have enough of the positions to be filled by our own citizens, domestically.
Right.
But it is being terribly abused, and then they continue to roll new people in so that they can keep the wages artificially suppressed. And the tech industry is notorious for this.
Yeah, for sure. Interesting. Anyway, let me get back to this issue, though, of priorities, because I started my program talking about this today, Congressman Rosendale. I had Congressman Mark Green on recently, and we always appreciate his contributions to the head of the Homeland Security Committee. But in my exchange with him, I noticed that Congress was given members of Congress were able to sit down and watch a video of the Hamas attack on Israel, as it was filmed from the vantage of Hamas. Horrific, just terrible scenes. And many members of Congress reported that it was unbearable. They could barely watch it. Some left, apparently. And I asked Congressman Green about this, and I wondered to what extent you'd be for it. I think I know the answer. But why isn't there a demonstration? Why isn't there a video? Why don't we sit down members of Congress in a theater to show them what's happening in America? That is, what's happening on our southern border. The death, the rape, the torture, the human trafficking, the sex trafficking, people dying to fentanyl who are just on the streets, succumbing to overdoses. Any sense that that's going to happen anytime soon? I mean, how much enthusiasm is there in Congress to talk about domestic issues?
Vince, I honestly, when I see what is taking place at our southern border, I've gone down there 3 times now, okay? And when I see what is taking place, and it is now reached throughout the entire country, my attorney general, state attorney general, has told me that the cartels are operating in all 50 states, and we have witnessed not the severity, okay, of the invasion that's taking place on our southern border, but we certainly hear the data about it on a daily basis on the evening news, and for the American people not to outcry and demand that something is done about this southern border. And look, we know what to do about it. We saw the policies that Donald Trump implemented, the Remain in Mexico policy, the close down of the asylum status that people were claiming and trying to utilize to stream into our country. We saw a turn of events and the reduction of the illegal immigration that was taking place. And so we know what will work. And for the American people not to demand this, it bewilders me. We're spending probably in the neighborhood of $500 billion a year. Anybody who thinks that this isn't costing them money, they're kidding themselves. When people stream across the border, they are fitted out with clean clothes, clean underwear, new shoes. They're given a bus ticket or a flight ticket to pretty much anywhere they want to go in the country. And then I assure you, once they arrive there, either locally, state, or federal, they are getting provided with assistance for food, housing, education, health care.
At whose expense? Who's paying for it?
Veterans are. And we are.
Yeah.
And we're borrowing money in order to pay for it. We're borrowing money to pay for it. So when people start talking to me about sending money to Ukraine, and that's a priority, the problem is that we see in Congress is that everybody thinks that you have to make some kind of deal on something that you don't like in order to get the things that you do like. Well, guess what? They've been trying that plan for 2 decades, 3 decades now. And the very people that say that this is the way you have to function have been the architects of a $33 trillion national debt, Vince, and it's crushing our economy. This is what's making the dollar worth pennies instead of being able to fill your grocery bags up.
Yeah, they say they can walk and chew gum at the same time. They can't do either. It's like insane.
You can't negotiate deals that sell our country out in order to get something that is supposed to be done for our country anyway, which is secure our border and stop an invasion.
Oh, it's maddening. I don't even know how you have this job and stay sane. Congressman Matt Rosendale of Montana, thank you, sir, for your time today.
Hey, you have a great evening, and thank you and all your listeners.
Thank you, sir. Voted on a resolution to call for a ceasefire. A city council member tried to insert language condemning Hamas. Here's how that went.
There's not been beheadings of babies and rapings. Israel murdered their own people on October 7th.
Calling Hamas a terrorist organization is ridiculous, racist, and plays into genocidal propaganda that is flooding our media and that we should be doing everything possible to combat.
I support the right of Palestinians to resist occupation, including through Hamas, the armed wing of the unified Palestinian resistance.
Oh my gosh.
As an Arab, asking with this context to condemn Hamas is very anti-Arab racist.
The notion that this
condemning terrorism is anti-Arab?
Massacre of Jews is a fabricated
Pretty sure she's the bigot.
narrative. Many of those killed on October 7th.
Thank you, ma'am. Your time is up.
Including children, were killed by the IDF.
It was, oh my gosh. This whole thing is insane. The Israelis killed the children on October 7th, they're claiming. This is people just during the public comment period at this city council meeting, the city council voting unanimously to call for a ceasefire. They'd like Israel to stop defending itself. That was what Oakland is. Does Oakland have any other problems worth dealing with? Let's see here. Oakland just hit a grim milestone. The city has passed 100 homicides recorded so far in 2023. That's the 4th straight year in a row with over 100 murders in the city. Also, it should be noted that Oakland has just lost several major sports franchises. The Raiders, they're gone. The Athletics, well, they've left. The Golden State Warriors, they're gone. Everybody's leaving. The murder is through the roof. And they're voting on ceasefires in Gaza. And the people during the public comment period are arguing that Hamas are the good guys. maybe it's time for us to let the San Andreas Fault do its work. You know? Sorry, California. We tried. There's no salvaging you. The great one, Mark Levin, up next here on WMAL.